Hello everyone. So in today's DNP, we are going to cover the Hindu newspaper of 25th of May 2026. So the first news that came, okay, this was Quad grouping is vital, says Japan's foreign minister. So the news, what it reads is where, responding to concerns that Quad has lost its relevance, Japan's foreign minister has said four nation grouping remains vital framework. So over here, the most important point of if we see, our Mr. Motegi indicated that cooperation over critical minerals needed for green energy and high technology would be at the top of meeting agenda. So the idea is on Tuesday, these Quad members are meeting in India itself. And before the meeting itself, the indication that cooperation over critical minerals would be on the meeting agenda. As well as Japan is working on critical mineral projects in India, he said, while calling for improved infrastructure, more tax subsidies, and so on. So the first thing over here, that is Japan working in India. If we see, the first one overall as of now has been a rare earth refining. So rare earth refining, this facility right now is run in Andhra Pradesh by Toyota Susho. That's one thing when we say Japan is working on critical minerals projects. That's the first project I can see over here. Secondly, apart from that now, the next one where India and Japan has signed a MOU of cooperation on rare earth minerals. Then along with that now, Japan and India are collaborating on the deep sea exploration. Deep sea exploration. So these are the areas where Japan is working with India on critical minerals project. Then along with that, in this news, we see that it will also set the agenda for the Quad Summit that has not taken place since 2024 amid India-US tensions on number of issues. So overall, what we see here is the last meeting that happened, okay, was in 2024. After that, the meeting has not taken place. Overall, Quad, when you see, Quad is a grouping comprises of four members. That's why the name Quad, which includes India, US, Japan, and Australia. Initially, the basic aim was the security of Indo-Pacific region, but eventually, over the period of time, the grouping has been looking forward for other areas of cooperation as well. But the last meeting happened in 2024 itself. Now, this news was continued towards next part, where what has been given primarily is in the continuation. We see in April, Ms. Takaichi had also proposed a partnership on wide energy resource resilience, that is Power Asia. Now, this partnership, when we talk about, this is a partnership which is Japan-led initiative. It is a $10 billion Japan-led initiative. And it is basically aiming at securing and stabilizing energy supply chains across the Indo-Pacific. So the same concept continues. That is the focus on Indo-Pacific. Overall, here also you can see US national security strategy says the country will encourage New Delhi to contribute to Indo-Pacific security. So now, as on Tuesday, when the meeting summit happens, okay, then the outcomes will be able to check further. But as of now, this is whole of the idea of this news which was covered. After this, the next news, which was not a news basically, it came in editorial, which is the US ends Russia oil waiver, and so the implication for India. So now in this case, when we talk about the implications, the overall aspect related to that, say for example, the United Nations states decision to tighten restrictions again on Russia. That is whole of the idea right now. So what we see is the issue is no longer just Russia. It is whether the global energy system can withstand simultaneous geopolitical shocks without causing prolonged inflation, etc. That's the most important part. So here, the idea that the latest restrictions come at a sensitive moment, oil markets are already unsettled by conflict in West Asia, persistent disruption in maritime trade routes, and growing concerns over Strait of Hormuz. So here, what the writer is trying to say is when there is already questions on the energy security with respect to supply as well as supply lines, the source and the supply lines. At this moment, again putting sanctions on Russian trade, that is going to create the problems. That's one thing. Now, when we say why India cannot ignore this development, the facts which come that India imports nearly 90% of its crude oil and is world's third largest importer, as well as one of the fastest growing energy consumers. So overall, with respect to India, when we see, yes, of course, India gets its oil, okay, primarily from West Asia, and then it was getting the oil from Russia. So if you see when Russian crude began flowing into India in large volumes after 2022, many in the West viewed it through a geopolitical lens, whereas India saw it as an economic stabilizer during a period of extreme volatility. So, Russian oil supply is somewhere a shock absorber for India with respect to any shocks that come up in the global supply chain. So, Russian oil helped moderate inflationary pressures, improved refinery economics, and reduced dependence on any single region. And which region this one we are talking about is majorly West Asia. So that's where it is said that for countries such as India, energy affordability directly affects transportation costs, food inflation, fertilizer subsidy, and so on. And that's where what is the significance for India. Now, when you see the next part, that is when sanctions meet market reality, what is written is first of all what has been happening across the world. So, what has been happening across the world? The world has already seen disruptions in Red Sea, let's say first, attacks on shipping infrastructure, second, growing military tensions involving Iran, third, tighter tank availability, and sharply higher war risk insurance premiums. So, whenever these global trades would happen, uh, insurance would be mandatory. And whenever there are war times, risk times, the insurance becomes very costly. When the insurance becomes very costly, effectively, the price becomes higher for the importing country in their market. So, under these conditions, let's say four conditions that we read over here. Okay, under these conditions, definitely there are problems or issues in the global supply chain. Now, what is the scenario? The US and Europe wants to reduce Russia's oil revenue, but they also want lower inflation, stable food prices, and uninterrupted global energy flows. Increasingly, these objectives are colliding with each other. Why? How come? Let's see. One, you want to reduce Russia's oil revenues, correct? But along with that, you want to lower inflation, stabilize fuel prices, and so on and so forth. But we'll have to understand that the more the sanctions are there would be more bottlenecks in terms of oil availability. So when the global supply would be disrupted due to sanctions on Russian oil, what is going to happen? From supply side, if there is a disruption, then the prices of crude oil in the market is going to increase. Now, if the prices in the international market is going to increase, Russia will benefit from these increased prices, even if its exports are cut off due to sanctions and all. Within the lower volume exports itself, it would be able to earn almost similar or even more than what it was earning. So here you can see that higher prices would be able to offset the lower quantities exported. And that is what this paragraph reads about. What is it reading? The harder sanctions become, the greater the risk of tightening global supply balance. That's one point. Once oil price rises sufficiently, Russia can continue earning substantial revenues despite lower export volumes. In some cases, higher global prices can partially offset the impact of sanctions altogether. So in this case, overall here, if I see, in some cases, higher global prices would be able to offset the impact of sanctions themselves. This explains why sanction policy has repeatedly oscillated. So that's one part. Now over here, the uncomfortable truth is that the modern global economy still runs overwhelmingly on hydrocarbon. Despite rapid growth of renewables, oil remains central to transport and X and Y and Z. So that's precisely all of the idea. Now, with respect to India, if you see for India, the challenge is even more complex. Strait of Hormuz remains a major strategic vulnerability, carrying nearly 1/5 of the global oil trade. Okay. So now a large share of India's crude oil transit through these waters. And as we are going through the crisis in West Asia, okay, definitely that supply route has been compromised now. So this is why Russian crude evolved into something larger than a discounted barrel for Asia. It emerged as a diversification mechanism. So that's the idea. So overall, today, vulnerabilities are far more than complex. Energy flow can now be disrupted by what? It's not just about whether the exporting country is ready to export or not. It's also now about disruptions in the shipping, insurance controls, financial sanctions which are there, payment barriers can be there, maritime security. So multi-dimensional threats are there basically. And with this multi-dimensional threats, for any country to navigate through these challenges, it will require, most importantly, the diversification. And that is what the next paragraph basically reads. So over here, what is it? This changing landscape has major implication for India's long-term strategy. India cannot rely indefinitely on opportunistic crude sourcing during crisis. The country needs a broader, more resilient energy framework. And what is that? That means expanding strategic petroleum reserves. One, that is the solutions we are talking about. Expanding strategic petroleum reserves. Second, diversifying crude source region. So that is what we were talking about. That West Asia is from where already we are getting it. Now Russian oil we are getting. So this is diversification across multiple sources. Strengthening domestic exploration that can happen with the domestic policies which are there. Improving refining flexibility, accelerating gas infrastructure, expanding alternate energy pathways, and reducing dependence on vulnerable marine choke points. So reducing dependence or vulnerable maritime choke points, that would be sort of different energy infrastructures that India can go with. Say, for example, gas supply pipelines or oil supply pipelines. So over here, strengthening domestic exploration, which is there. Then most importantly, fourth one, which is expanding alternate energy pathways. And fifth, these are fivefold solutions that we can check over here. So over here, the idea that has been read is for major importing countries, excessive dependence on any single geopolitical camp carries long-term risk. India's approach, therefore, reflects not neutrality but realism. And the last part, which is the conclusion part, which is the world is entering an era in which sanctions, wars, maritime security, and supply chain disruption may have become recurring features rather than temporary exceptions. That makes resilience more important than ideology. So, this is all of the idea. And how do we read this whole article? Is basically where we are talking about the West Asia crisis, which is happening, and the US reimposing sanctions on Russian oil. So, under those conditions, these two situations now going to develop simultaneously. And with respect to India, we have said India majorly since dependent on oil imports, implications on India would be widespread, given the crisis in West Asia, as well as now sanctions on Russian oil. And then we have been talking about what are the different threat scenarios over here. The threats, different threats which are there, and then what can be the overall solutions which are there. So, solutions over here. So, this is the whole idea of this article, where the takeaway is that India should follow realism and India should be looking for maintaining its strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy in what? Strategic autonomy in energy decision making, where India should be able to decide the sourcing of oil. Next article now, which came up, that is India's green transition still runs on coal. Very, very good article, very good analysis, which is there. Overall idea of this article to start with is where, although India has expanded its renewable energy installed capacity, but still energy generation is something in which we are yet to see those developments, and therefore suggesting the solutions on what can be done. So overall now, when we see through this article, what it reads is, despite years of policy emphasis on renewable energy, nearly half of India's fossil fuel imports still transit through Strait of Hormuz, including what? Crude oil, Saudi Arabia, liquefied natural gas from Qatar. So, crude oil from Saudi Arabia, LNG from Qatar. That's the first. Then, over the past decade, India has emerged as one of the world's fastest growing renewable energy market. Correct. In numbers, renewable energy sources accounted for 42.4% of India's installed power capacity from 0.72 in March 2005. So you see, this is a significant development. Over the same period, coal share in installed capacity fell actually from around 58.7% to 42.2%. So overall, in terms of installed capacity, renewable energy capacity has increased significantly, whereas the coal-based installed capacity has declined. So on paper, it looks very good. Correct. Yet the persistence of energy price shocks reveal a more complicated reality. And now this is the part we have to focus upon. Installed capacity is not same as actual electricity generation. And what it reads, while renewables now account for over 2/5 of installed capacity, which is 42.4%. 42.4%. They generated only 15.8% of electricity. Similarly, coal accounted for 71.8% of electricity generation. So over here, if I compare renewables and coal, installed capacity and generation, these two parts, if we see over here, installed capacity, in terms of installed capacity, you see it is 42.4%, whereas this is 42.2%, correct? But in terms of generation, if you see, this is just 15.8%, whereas with respect to coal, it is 71.8%. Now you can compare and see the difference. This is the problem we are talking about right now in India, that the installed capacity has not yet translated into power generation as well. So this capacity and generation gap, this is what we have to think in terms of. So it says, in effect, renewable energy is being added on the top of coal rather than displacing it. Correct? Despite strong renewable growth, India has added almost no new fossil fuel capacity since 2018, retired very few old coal plants, and seen gas-based capacity decline. Now, with all of this, because we do not have this whole generation, that's why coal remains the main backup and balancing source in the power system. And now let's see the reasons. This is what we have to focus upon, the reasons. The reasons are structural. And what are these? If I see over here, first thing, solar and wind power remains intermittent source of electricity. That's the first reason. Second, their output fluctuates with weather conditions and at the time, while electricity demands remain continuous. That's the first part. Second, in the absence of large-scale battery storage. Second issue. Flexible grids. Third issue. Balancing capacity. Fourth issue. So now what you see is, be it solar and wind, they are not continuous sources of electricity. Say, for example, solar. Solar power generation can happen only when there is broad sunshine outside. Similarly, wind power generation depends on the velocity of the wind. And so it cannot be 24/7 generation. Now, once you are generating it intermittently, if you have to use it later also, one most important thing you should have have battery storage. And then grid should be able to handle it. Okay, where at what time, what type of source is sourcing the electricity, and it keeps changing. So you should have flexible grids. And for that, a balancing capacity. This is where we see the basic problem, which is our structural problems. So overall, in this case, when we write the structural issues, one that is intermittent nature, apart from that, battery storage. In addition to battery storage, grid, and the balancing capacity. These are four structural issues due to which there cannot be complete dependence on renewable as of now. That is what it reads. So when we come to ground reality, what is the ground reality? It says a spike in crude prices not only raises transportation and industrial costs directly, but also push up coal prices with the transportation of the coal, electricity tariff, inflation, and fiscal pressure. So, India's energy transition discourse increasingly centered around wrong benchmark. the focus remains on installed renewable capacity. So we are saying that our benchmark itself is wrong. When we are boasting that our installed capacity has increased, renewable installed capacity has increased 42 to 42.4%, that's not a real picture. The real picture is 15.8% contribution to power generation only. And that's what is the most important point. So over here, power systems are not sustained by headline capacity addition. They depend on what? Actual electricity generation and the ability to supply power consistently. So this is the problem now, if you see, with respect to the differences in terms of what is actual installed capacity and what is the actual electricity generation contribution. So when we talk about the solution part, now the solution part. So from solution, when we see work towards system transformation. So what is written, this does not diminish the importance of renewable push. On the contrary, India's decision to aggressively scale solar and wind capacity now appears prescient given growing geopolitical instability and fossil fuel volatility. And what is needed? But the next phase of transition will require moving beyond capacity creation towards system transformation itself. And system transformation, now we understand, okay, including the systemic issues which are there. So what that means? That means what? Investing in a storage infrastructure, grid modernization, transmission connectivity, and market mechanism. So this is what is the system transformation would be all about. Would be about storage, would be about grid, transmission, market. It also requires recognizing that coal's persistence is not simply a policy failure. Coal currently performs a stabilizing function within the grid that renewable energy in the present form cannot yet fully replicable. And that is where right now our dependence on coal is. So till these systemic transformations are not undertaken, we will continue to be dependent on coal for stabilizing our power supply systems. So India's energy challenge today is therefore not merely about producing more green power. It is about building an electricity system in which renewables can reliably substitute for fossil fuels in electricity generation. So overall, this article has been talking about what precisely India's green transition entails. Okay, when we say that our renewable energy capacity has improved, okay, what precisely it means, where are the issues, and what can be the long-term solutions, where the solution basically focuses on the systemic transformations. So these have been the major news that were covered in the Hindu newspaper today.